Soon, I fly out to Geneva to participate in the Watches and Wonders 2024 spectacle in Geneva. I have a full weekend of staring at watches that I either can't afford or will never have the purchase history to be taken into consideration for. But never mind, it's going to be fun because I'll get to see a bucket load of cool watches. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those lucky souls that gets an invite from a specific watch manufacturer. I don't have early access. I don't have that kind of clout. But I've decided that it's a good thing because what it means is I have a couple of days to scour each manufacturer's website, see what they've released, and form some initial opinions and plan what I want to dive into once I get there. As of this video, pretty much every brand has updated their sites with the new models. These are the models I've taken note of, the ones I found interesting, and things that I find either interesting or puzzling. Let's dive in. Rolex. So, short version. This seems like a very quiet year for Rolex. Last year, they released the black grey two-tone and full gold GMT. They released a new Daytona, a commemorative Daytona, colourful oyster perpetual dials, and they even released the titanium Yachtmaster. Comparatively, their releases are a bit of a yawn this year. Rolex is hardly ever terrible, but very little is blowing my socks off this year. The black oyster grey steel GMT was entirely expected. Rolex does the upgrade game like no other, and by introducing the black grey full gold and two-tone models, it was just a question of time before the oyster steel version was introduced. Everything at Rolex is about driving people up that funnel. The number of options at steel level are much more limited compared to the options at two-tone and full gold levels. Just as an example, consider how many variations of Daytonas there are that are not steel. The new Sea Dweller in full gold follows the same logic. I'd be surprised if this watch is particularly popular. It has always been a bit of a brick, but in fairness, there are people out there with above 7-inch wrists, so surely there is some market for this watch. The standout release, though, so far, I think, is the Platinum 1908. I wasn't a huge fan of the 1908 when it was first released, but this dial looks really impressive and at least visually sends my mind in the direction of Patek Philippe especially. This is the one that I think steals the show, and it's the one I want to see the most. Tudor. Last year was also a huge year for Tudor. This year less so, but there are a couple of interesting watches and moves that I think are worth taking note of. Maybe though, not for the reason that you think. First is the new Black Bay Black in 41mm. Metas, thinner case, just like the Burgundy last year. The major change though is that all the gilt is gone. Faux Tina is out, restraint and simplicity is in. Tudor telegraphed this trend last year with the less guilty Black Bay 54, and the new Black 41 follows the same trend. I've been thinking gilt and faux Tina was close to dead for a while, so this is entirely unsurprising to me. I also think the watch looks good. I do, however, have an initial first criticism. Tudor now has the Pelagos 39, which is black, restrained, and simple. The Pelagos FXD, which is black, restrained, and simple. The Black Bay 54, black, restrained, simple. And now they have the Black Bay Black in 41mm, which is black, restrained, and simple. It's likely the right direction, but I can't help but feel that these watches unintentionally are a whole lot more samey than they were just 1 week ago. Also, this general trend of restraint, which is very much linked to people not feeling they have a bucket load of money in their bank accounts, runs the risk of becoming incredibly plain over time. The other key watch is the Black Bay 58 GMT. 39mm GMT, everybody and their sister wants that watch. It's less than 13mm in height, what's not to like? It's got a Coke bezel, yes please. But I'm honestly surprised about one thing, gilt. Where the Black Bay 41 loses the gilt like the 54 did last year, this GMT keeps that gold and gilt aesthetic. Based on what I think is the general trend for watch designs, this is a little bit surprising. A simple grey or silver design would have been what I expected purely from an overall trend perspective. Personally, I'm not convinced and I'm not sure I like it, but I'll have to reserve my verdict until I get down there. Panerai. Why waste space on Panerai? Nobody cares about Panerai anymore. Well, I do. Panerai haven't been mainstream since Stallone and Schwarzenegger retired, but these last years they've been slimming down their models in both diameter and height. And I think every now and again they have been launching something that should have gotten more attention. The watch I care about this year is the new Luminor Ceramitech with the blue dial. These watches are not Quaranto models, so 44mm is not going to be for everyone, but this model specifically is the Panerai version of the Tudor Pelagos FXD Alenghi. Ceramic black, blue dial, red accents, colorful strap, and no Red Bull logo. This thing looks badass, and most of you will probably not care, but I think it looks way cool and I have to get my hands on if possible. IWC released a new Portuguesa. Again, this is not a watch that gets a lot of love, despite being one of those semi-iconic watches that people usually talk about. The watch has never really resonated with me. For me, they were often too big in many variations. But there's a model where they have a case back which is 99% movement. This thing looks super cool, and I have to see it in person and see what kind of emotion it stirs. Apart from that, it looks more like an iterative update, apart from one thing, which is more of another comment on trend. Last year, IWC released the Pilot Chrono Performance Sport AMG Petronas, whatever thing, which I wasn't a fan of. One of the things I did take a note of then was how they had taken the iconic Pilot Chrono and given it a sportier bracelet to position the watch more closely in the segment of watches like the Speedmaster and the Daytona. The Portuguesa has now received the same bracelet update. That bracelet has a clear purpose, and that is to move the Portuguesa from a dress watch space to a sports watch space. It's kind of what Nomos did with the Club to the Club Sport. IWC is moving their lines, which I think is probably a good idea from a market perspective. Those bracelets are what people want, and it pulls the Portuguesa out of that dress watch space and into a more contemporary space. Of course, the watch won't sell because of a bracelet alone, so I'll get back to you on how the watch looks on that bracelet in the metal. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or it's just me reading into what I just noticed and fall for, but there seem to be a lot of Moonfaces this year. Raymond Weil has one. I'm a big fan of the Mille Sim from Raymond Weil. The small seconds sector type dial is a winner for me, and this watch is now available in a Moonface version with a gold case. Moonfaces have always been a favorite complication of mine, and this is a watch I'd love to get my hands on. Laurent Ferrier have released a classic Moon Blue calendar and Moonface, which is stunning. It's not a watch I would ever prioritize owning, as I very rarely wear dress style watches, but this looks like something worth spending some time on. Frédéric Constant have also launched a Moonface watch. FC have for the longest time been a brand I associate with slightly oversized cases and not particularly refined dials for semi-complicated watches. But in the last couple of years, they've made a number of tweaks to their designs that make their watches a little bit more sleek, a little bit more refined, and they come across as just that bit more premium for that reason. The green Moonface is no different. So for Frédéric Constant, I will be checking out all their watches and see if I still have that feeling that their product lineup is shifting in terms of aesthetic, but also in terms of positioning. Zenith. I've been considering buying a Zenith for the longest time. The shortlist includes the new triple calendar Moonface chronograph, which I think is ridiculously cool because of the combination of complications in a wearable size. The day, date, and month windows are not ideally placed, and the gold hands are not necessarily spot on, but it's a very nice watch. Then there's the A384, which I've been dreaming of for a while, but then ID Guy bought the watch and did a video on it, and I was like, oh no, am I just buying it or considering buying it because he's getting it? And that sort of sent me in a whole spiral of overthinking things. And if you know my channel, I generally overthink things. So it's been on pause. And then what happened was the Speedmaster in white came out, and I was like, do I get a Speedmaster or do I get a A384? Both white dials. Then there's the Daytona, which I've never really liked, but it's kind of cool. Doesn't matter, I can't get it anyway. But the fact is, the Zenith is very close to being one of the watches I would like to get. Long story though, Zenith have released a couple of things that I found interesting. My gut reaction to the Zenith Extreme Defy Divers collection is that they are hideous. I don't like them at all, but I know this is a design that needs to be tried on the wrist. Potentially they are going to be too big, too gaudy, and too over the top in the way that the Royal Oak Offshore is the over the top version of the regular Royal Oak. Then there's the A3684 diver watch, which instantly had me thinking of a Doxa. No surprise, of course, it's because of the color of the bezel and the orange on the dial. My gut feeling tells me that it's not a me watch, but I'm still fascinated by it. And the simple fact that Zenith are rolling out divers is an interesting development. In the most recent years, Zenith has mainly been like a pilot's watch and a sports watch brand. Throwing a couple of divers into the mix speaks to them adding a new category of watches that may appeal to some buyers that have historically not gravitated towards Zenith. Finally, there's the Zenith Defy Skyline Chrono. I have always been a big fan of the Skyline models, especially the skeletonized ones. I've also always been a big fan of the Defy Extremes, which unfortunately were just always too large to ever actually be considered as watches I would ever actually buy. But a 42mm chronograph, that's a maybe. It does give off Royal Oak vibes, not necessarily in a good way. It does have a 430 date window, which is not a plus. And the inner dial is octagonal as well, which is a design choice that I initially don't agree with. But let's see when I see it in the metal. What others? Then there's the Patek 5980 Nautilus Chrono in white gold. It's unobtainium, but damn, that thing looks good. Of the things that are a little more on the meh side, Nomos has multiple color variations of the Nomos Tangente on show. They look cool, but dial updates are very Nomos. It's fine, I love their watches, but it's not something that's blowing me away from a release perspective. I'm also going to stop by Grand Seiko, but just like Rolex, they initially feel a little bit iterative in terms of the way they're releasing things. Maybe one of the new dials will stand out, we'll see, but it doesn't feel particularly new or innovative. Tag Heuer has a couple of new skippers and glass boxes. They look good, but again, iterative. Cartier decided to make a Santos Dumont that has the watch tell time in the reverse direction. Fun, but no, not for me. The Overseas from Vacheron Constantin now has a green dial. That's very nice, but overall a little bit late to the green dial party. JLC released a slew of duometers. Nothing as exciting as last year's Reverso Chrono. They're great watches for sure, but not mind-blowing in terms of bringing something new to the table. Overall, I get the feeling that this isn't quite as breakout a year as last year. There doesn't feel to be as many knock it out of the park bangers as there were in 2023, but maybe I'm wrong. My gut feeling though is that the market is a bit depressed, so a lot of brands are playing it safe and holding a bit back on the innovation and not taking a whole lot of chances. Those are my initial thoughts. I'm just waiting to get ready to go off to the airport in a couple of days. What do you want me to prioritize taking a look at while I'm in Geneva? Which brands and which watches do you think I should dive into while there? Let me know in the comments. And also, if you're down there, be sure to say hi, like, subscribe. Cheers.